The neon lights of Nexus Station cast their familiar purple glow across the main deck as Marcus Chen wiped down the bar counter for what felt like the 1,000th time that cycle. The worn synthetic cloth moved in practiced circles, removing the sticky residue left by alien patrons who had no concept of using coasters. 23 years he had been serving drinks to every species imaginable, from the crystalline Zephyrians who absorbed their nutrients through their translucent skin to the massive Krogar who could down a bottle of industrial-grade ethanol and still ask for seconds. To everyone on the station, Marcus was just another human bartender. Unremarkable. Forgettable. The kind of person who blended into the background while alien dignitaries conducted their business and trade negotiations happened around him. He preferred it that way. The less attention he drew, the better. The doors to his establishment, the cosmic pour, slid open with a soft hiss, and Marcus glanced up to see a group he recognized immediately. 3 Valorian guards in their distinctive crimson armor strode in, their multiple eyes scanning the dimly lit interior with practiced suspicion. Behind them walked Ambassador Thextar, his blue-scaled hide gleaming under the bar lights. The Valorians were known throughout the galaxy as some of the most formidable warriors, their reflexes enhanced by cybernetic implants and their loyalty absolute. "The usual booth, Ambassador?" Marcus called out, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of a career service worker. Thextar nodded curtly, his gills fluttering slightly in what Marcus had learned was the equivalent of acknowledgement. The group settled into the corner booth that provided the best view of all entrances and exits. The guards positioned themselves strategically, one facing the main door, another watching the service entrance, and the third keeping an eye on the other patrons. Marcus prepared Thextar's preferred drink, a complex mixture of fermented Altarian fruit juice and synthetic compounds that would be toxic to most species, but provided the ambassador with essential nutrients. As he worked, he listened to fragments of conversation drifting from their table, a skill he had perfected over the years. "The Earth delegation arrives tomorrow," Thextar was saying, his voice carrying easily in the quiet bar. "Intelligence suggests they're more desperate than they're letting on." The lead guard, a scarred veteran named Commander Vexco, leaned forward. "Their military capabilities are negligible. Primitive projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their ships barely qualify as interstellar capable." Marcus's hand paused for a fraction of a second as he reached for the garnish, but he quickly recovered. He had learned long ago to control such reactions. "Don't underestimate them entirely," Thextar replied, accepting his drink from Marcus without acknowledgement. They managed to survive their first contact protocols without triggering a full-scale panic. That shows some level of adaptability. Commander Vexco snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. "Adaptability won't help them when they realize the terms of the Galactic Accords. They'll be lucky if we allow them mining rights to their own asteroid belt." As Marcus returned to cleaning glasses, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. To anyone looking, he appeared to be a middle-aged human with graying temples and the soft physique of someone who had spent decades in low-gravity environments. What they couldn't see was the network of surgical scars hidden beneath his shirt, the titanium reinforcements in his skeleton, or the neural implants that had been deactivated so long ago that even advanced medical scanners would miss them. The conversation at the booth continued, and Marcus learned more than he wanted to about the upcoming negotiations. Earth's delegation would be arriving with hopes of establishing favorable trade relationships and gaining access to galactic technology. What they didn't know was that the major powers had already decided their fate. Humanity would be offered a choice: become a client species under Valorian protection, or face economic isolation that would effectively trap them in their own solar system. The humans believe they're negotiating from a position of equality, Thextar continued, savoring his drink. Ambassador Chen, no relation to our silent bartender here, I assume, has been preparing for months. They've studied our customs, learned our languages, and crafted what they believe to be compelling proposals. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. Ambassador Chen, Sarah Chen, his daughter. He forced himself to continue his routine, moving to stock the upper shelves while keeping his expression neutral. 25 years ago, when he had disappeared from Earth, Sarah had been 7 years old. The last time he had seen her, she was proudly showing him a drawing of him in his military uniform. She had wanted to be just like Daddy when she grew up. "What do we know about this Ambassador Chen?" Commander Vexco asked, echoing the question that was burning in Marcus's mind. Young for a diplomat, only 32 standard years, brilliant academic record, speaks 4 galactic languages fluently, and has an impressive understanding of interspecies psychology. She was chosen specifically because the Earth government believes her combination of intelligence and inexperience will make her appear non-threatening to us. Marcus's grip tightened on the bottle he was holding. Sarah had followed in his footsteps after all, just not in the way either of them had expected. While he had served in Earth's military during humanity's most desperate hour, she had chosen the path of diplomacy. "The irony," Thextar continued, "is that her background makes her potentially dangerous. Her father was Marcus Chen, one of Earth's most decorated Special Forces operatives. He disappeared during the Centauri campaign 25 years ago, presumed killed in action. Some psychological profiles suggest she's driven by a need to prove herself worthy of his legacy." The bottle in Marcus's hand exploded. The sound of breaking glass cut through the ambient noise of the bar like a plasma blade. Every head turned toward him as synthetic alcohol and glass shards scattered across the floor behind the bar. The Valorian guards were on their feet instantly, hands moving to their weapons with reflexes that would have impressed most military units. "Apologies," Marcus said quickly, raising his hands to show they were empty. "Slippery fingers. Too much cleaning solution." He knelt down to gather the larger pieces of glass, using the motion to hide his face as he fought to control his expression. When he stood up, the guards were still watching him with suspicious eyes, but they had relaxed slightly. "Perhaps our bartender friend is more interesting than he appears," Commander Vexco said, his voice carrying a note of speculation. Thextar waved a dismissive hand. "He's been serving drinks here for over 2 decades. If he were a threat, we would have discovered it by now. Besides, look at him. Does he appear capable of anything more challenging than mixing drinks?" The casual dismissal stung more than Marcus cared to admit, but he forced a self-deprecating smile. "Just a clumsy old human, Ambassador. Nothing more exciting than that." As the evening progressed, Marcus learned more details about the upcoming negotiations. The Earth delegation would be staying in the station's diplomatic quarters, under constant surveillance disguised as security protection. Their communications would be monitored, their movements tracked, and their every interaction analyzed for strategic advantage. What worried Marcus most was learning about the backup plans. If the negotiations failed to produce the desired outcome, there were contingencies in place. Earth's delegation could suffer an unfortunate accident, blamed on equipment failure or terrorist action. With their diplomatic team eliminated, Earth would be even more vulnerable to pressure and demands. The 3 other humans who worked various jobs around the station were all in similar positions to Marcus, refugees from Earth's early conflicts who had found ways to disappear into the galactic community. None of them knew about the others' true backgrounds, and Marcus intended to keep it that way. But as he listened to the Valorians discuss his daughter's impending arrival, he realized that his carefully constructed life of anonymity was about to collide with the family he had left behind. When the bar finally closed and the last patron had departed, Marcus stood alone among the empty tables and chairs. The cleaning bots would handle most of the mess, but he had always preferred to handle the more delicate items himself. As he worked, His mind raced through possibilities and scenarios. He could warn Sarah somehow, but any communication from the station to Earth was monitored. He could try to contact the human underground network that he suspected existed among the station's population, but that would risk exposing not just himself, but others who had found safety in anonymity. Or he could do what he had been trained to do 25 years ago, when Earth's survival had depended on soldiers willing to operate behind enemy lines with no support and no expectation of rescue. Marcus walked to the back room of his bar and knelt beside what appeared to be a standard storage container. His fingers found the hidden panel that had remained unopened for over 2 decades. Inside, wrapped in synthetic materials that had kept them preserved and functional, were items that belonged to a different life. A small device that could slice through most known metals, micro-explosives that could disable security systems or eliminate targets with surgical precision, false identification documents that would pass all but the most advanced scrutiny, and at the bottom of the container, a small data chip containing information that the Valorian Empire had spent years trying to acquire, the locations and specifications of Earth's hidden defensive installations. Military capabilities that went far beyond the primitive projectile weapons that Commander Vexco had so dismissively mentioned. And most importantly, the real reason why Marcus Chen had been presumed dead 25 years ago. He had been captured during a deep reconnaissance mission in Valorian space. For 2 years, he had been held in facilities that officially didn't exist, subjected to interrogation techniques that pushed the boundaries of what most species considered acceptable. When he finally escaped, he had taken with him intelligence that would have changed the balance of power in the galaxy. But instead of returning home, Marcus had made a choice that haunted him every day since. Earth was safe, as long as its enemies believed humanity was weak and primitive. His return would have revealed capabilities that would have marked his species for immediate elimination, so he had disappeared, allowing Earth to maintain its facade of harmless incompetence while secretly building the defenses that would one day allow them to stand as equals in the galactic community. Now, 25 years later, that sacrifice was about to be tested. His daughter was walking into a trap designed to crush humanity's hopes and ensure their permanent subjugation. The very intelligence he had died to protect might be the only thing that could save her. Marcus closed the container and returned to the main bar. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he allowed himself a moment to remember the man he used to be. The soldier who had been willing to sacrifice everything for his species' survival. The father who had never stopped thinking about the daughter he could never see again. As the station's artificial dawn began to brighten the viewports, Marcus made his decision. The bartender would remain invisible and unnoticed for a little while longer. But Marcus Chen, the soldier, was about to return from the dead. The diplomatic transport ship Unity's Promise docked at Nexus Station precisely at 0800 hours station time, its sleek hull bearing the blue and gold insignia of the United Earth Coalition. Marcus watched from the observation deck of the main corridor as the docking procedures completed, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it hadn't for decades. Somewhere aboard that ship was Sarah, the little girl who had grown up without a father, who had become a diplomat, carrying the hopes of their entire species. He forced himself to walk away before the airlocks opened. The cosmic pore wouldn't open for another 6 hours, but Marcus had work to do that had nothing to do with serving drinks. The maintenance tunnels beneath Nexus Station were a maze that most inhabitants never saw or thought about. They carried power conduits, atmospheric recycling systems, and communication networks that kept the massive structure functioning. More importantly, for Marcus's purposes, they provided access to nearly every section of the station without passing through monitored corridors. His first stop was a forgotten storage compartment 3 levels down from his bar. Inside, among discarded equipment and obsolete computer components, Marcus had hidden items he had hoped never to use again. A portable scanner that could penetrate most standard security measures. Communication jammers small enough to hide in serving equipment. And most importantly, a fabrication unit that could produce virtually any chemical compound given the right base materials. Marcus worked quickly but carefully, assembling equipment that would have gotten him executed on a dozen different worlds. The fabrication unit hummed quietly as it processed the rare earth elements he had been collecting for years, creating compounds that would be undetectable to standard security scans, but could incapacitate most known species within minutes. As he worked, Marcus thought about the conversation he had overheard the night before. The Valorians weren't just planning to intimidate the Earth delegation, they were preparing to eliminate them entirely if the negotiations didn't proceed according to their plans. Ambassador Thextar had mentioned at least 3 different scenarios, each designed to ensure that Earth would have no choice but to accept client species status. The most insidious was psychological warfare. The delegation would be subjected to increasingly hostile conditions disguised as cultural misunderstandings. Their communications with Earth would be delayed or selectively edited. They would be shown demonstrations of military might that would emphasize humanity's helplessness. By the time formal negotiations began, they would be desperate to accept any terms that guaranteed survival. If that approach failed, the Valorians had prepared more direct methods. Accidents could be arranged. Key members of the delegation could become ill from exposure to alien pathogens. Systems failures could leave them stranded and dependent on Valorian assistance. Each scenario maintained plausible deniability while achieving the same result. Marcus finished his preparations and sealed the storage compartment. His next stop was the communications hub, where a friend from his past life was about to receive an unexpected visitor. Technician Roberts had been working the night shift in communications for 15 years, and Marcus had been serving him coffee and synthetic alcohol for just as long. What Roberts didn't know was that Marcus had recognized him within days of starting work at the Cosmic Pore. Chief Petty Officer Jake Roberts, formerly of the Earth Navy's Electronic Warfare Division. Like Marcus, he had found reasons to disappear after the war, though their paths had never crossed during their service. Marcus found Roberts in the depths of the communications center, surrounded by quantum relay equipment that connected Nexus Station to networks spanning half the galaxy. The human looked up as Marcus approached, surprise evident on his weathered features. "Marcus? What are you doing down here? Station personnel only, you know." "I know, Jake," Marcus replied quietly, using the name that Roberts hadn't heard spoken aloud in over a decade. The effect was immediate. Roberts's hand moved instinctively toward a tool that could serve as a weapon, his body tensing into a combat stance that belonged to a different life. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by fear. "You can't be who I think you are," Roberts whispered. "Marcus Chen died on Kepler Station 25 years ago." "Marcus Chen did die," Marcus agreed. "But the bartender who's been serving you drinks needs your help to keep Earth's ambassador alive." The conversation that followed was brief and conducted in the kind of military shorthand that both men remembered from their service days. Roberts had maintained access to communication protocols that could bypass Valorian monitoring, and he had noticed unusual activity in the security networks surrounding the diplomatic quarters. Someone was preparing for what the system logs described as enhanced protection protocols, but Roberts's experience told him it looked more like preparation for a siege. "The Earth delegation is being housed in Section C7, Roberts explained as he pulled up station schematics on his workstation. "Standard diplomatic accommodations, but they've added quantum scramblers to the walls and ceiling-mounted surveillance that's military grade. The official reason is protection from potential terrorist activity." Marcus studied the layouts, his mind automatically calculating fields of fire, escape routes, and tactical advantages. Section C7 was a trap disguised as luxury accommodations. The diplomatic quarters were isolated from the main station population, accessible through only 3 corridors that could be easily sealed. The enhanced surveillance would track every movement, every conversation, every gesture the Earth delegation made. "There's something else," Roberts continued, lowering his voice even though they were alone in the communications center. "I've been monitoring restricted frequencies, and there's been chatter about a demonstration planned for tomorrow evening. Something about showing the humans the consequences of excessive ambition." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. A demonstration meant violence, probably directed at targets the Earth delegation would recognize as their own people. There were several hundred humans working throughout the station in various capacities, most of them refugees or immigrants who had found ways to integrate into galactic society. They would make perfect examples of what happened to humans who overreached their designated place in the universal order. "I need you to do something that's going to be dangerous," Marcus told Roberts. "Can you create a communication window that bypasses Valorian monitoring?" Roberts nodded slowly. "For about 30 seconds, maybe 45 if I'm lucky. After that, they'll detect the intrusion and trace it back to this station. That's enough time to send a message to Earth. A short one, but enough to warn them." "What kind of message?" Marcus pulled a small data chip from his pocket, the same chip he had hidden for 25 years. "This contains detailed information about Valorian military capabilities and strategic plans. It also includes proof that their diplomatic protocols are designed to entrap potential client species into unfavorable agreements." Roberts stared at the chip as if it were an armed explosive. "Where did you get this?" "From a dead man who spent 2 years in Valorian interrogation facilities learning exactly how their empire really operates." The implications hung in the air between them. If Roberts transmitted this information to Earth, it would expose both of them to consequences that made death seem like a merciful alternative. But it would also give Earth the intelligence they needed to negotiate from a position of actual knowledge rather than naive hope. "There's one more thing," Marcus continued. "I need you to arrange a system malfunction in Section C7. Nothing dangerous, just something that requires maintenance access. Can you do that without triggering security alerts?" Roberts's fingers danced across his control interface, pulling up maintenance schedules and system diagnostics. "Environmental controls are due for routine inspection tomorrow morning. I could accelerate the timeline, make it look like a preventive measure to avoid potential diplomatic embarrassment." "Perfect. Make it happen at 0900 hours. As Marcus prepared to leave the communications center, Roberts caught his arm. "Marcus, what you're planning, whatever it is, you know you'll never be able to go back to just being a bartender after this." Marcus nodded grimly. "The bartender was never meant to be permanent. Just a place to wait until my people needed me again." The rest of the day passed in a blur of careful preparation. Marcus returned to the cosmic pour and went through the motions of normal operation, serving drinks to patrons who had no idea that the quiet human behind the bar was planning an operation that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Valorian guards returned for their evening briefing, discussing the arrival of the Earth delegation with the casual arrogance of predators who had already selected their prey. "Ambassador Chen appears younger than her files suggested," Commander Vexco reported to Thextar. "Nervous, but trying to hide it behind professional composure. Her security detail is laughably inadequate. 2 humans with projectile weapons and minimal armor." Marcus's hand tightened on the glass he was cleaning as he listened to them discuss Sarah with clinical detachment. They described her mannerisms, analyzed her body language for signs of weakness, and evaluated her psychological profile for exploitable vulnerabilities. "The demonstration tomorrow should provide the necessary context for negotiations," Thextar replied. "Once Ambassador Chen understands the consequences of resistance, she'll be more receptive to our terms. And if she isn't? Then humanity will need a new diplomatic representative, and Earth will receive a clear message about the costs of diplomatic failure. That evening, after the last patron had departed and the cleaning bots had finished their cycles, Marcus made his final preparations. He sealed the entrance to the cosmic pore and activated privacy screens that would prevent surveillance from penetrating the establishment's interior. In the back room, he opened the storage container for the last time and removed items that belonged to the soldier he had once been. The tactical suit was designed for infiltration rather than direct combat, incorporating adaptive camouflage that could mimic most background materials. The weapons were compact and efficient, designed for close-quarters work where precision mattered more than firepower. Most importantly, the neural interface headset would restore his connection to combat systems that had been dormant for 2 decades. As Marcus activated the neural interface, he felt the familiar sensation of expanded awareness that came with enhanced reflexes and tactical analysis capabilities. His perception sharpened, his reaction time decreased, and his mind began processing his environment in the multi-layered fashion that had kept him alive through countless dangerous missions. For the first time in 25 years, Marcus Chen the soldier was fully awake. The maintenance access to Section C7 would open at 0900 hours the following morning. Marcus would have approximately 15 minutes before the environmental systems inspection was completed and normal security protocols resumed. 15 minutes to reach his daughter, warn her about the trap that had been prepared for Earth's delegation, and somehow find a way to extract them from a situation that the Valorians had spent months perfecting. It wasn't much time to save the future of human civilization, but Marcus had worked with worse odds before. As the station's artificial night cycle reached its deepest point, Marcus made his way toward the diplomatic quarters through maintenance tunnels that few beings knew existed. Behind him, the cosmic pore sat empty and dark, waiting for a bartender who might never return. Ahead of him, in a luxury suite designed to be a trap, his daughter was about to learn that sometimes the most important negotiations happened outside the conference room. The first phase of his mission was simple: reach Sarah without triggering security alerts. The second phase would be more challenging: convince Earth's ambassador that her bartender father had returned from the dead to save her life. The final phase would determine whether humanity's future would be written by their own hands or dictated by alien powers who saw them as nothing more than a resource to be managed. Marcus Chen had spent 25 years preparing for this moment. Tomorrow, he would discover if his sacrifice had been worth it. The environmental control panel in Section C7 displayed a routine amber warning at exactly 0900 hours, indicating elevated atmospheric recycling levels that required immediate inspection. Marcus had positioned himself in the maintenance shaft above the diplomatic quarters 30 minutes earlier, waiting for Roberts to create his window of opportunity. Through fiber optic cameras he had positioned during the night, he watched Valorian security guards respond to the alert with professional efficiency. 2 guards escorted the Earth delegation to a secondary conference room while maintenance access was granted to Section C7. Marcus had exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds before the inspection would be completed and normal security protocols resumed. He dropped through a ceiling panel into Ambassador Chen's private quarters with the silent grace that had once made him one of Earth's most effective special operations soldiers. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her temporary office, reviewing diplomatic files on a portable tablet. She had grown into a striking woman, with the same determined jawline that Marcus remembered from her childhood and intelligent eyes that missed very little. When she turned at the sound of his landing, her hand moved instinctively toward the emergency communicator on her belt. "Don't," Marcus said quietly, raising his hands to show they were empty. "I'm here to help you." Sarah's training as a diplomat kicked in immediately. She evaluated the intruder with calm professionalism, noting his maintenance coveralls, the lack of visible weapons, and the way he held himself with military precision despite his civilian appearance. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the obvious danger of the situation. "My name is Marcus Chen. I was a bartender until this morning. Before that, I was a soldier in the Earth Defense Force. And 25 years ago, I was your father." The tablet slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering against the floor as her carefully maintained composure cracked for the first time since arriving at Nexus Station. She stared at him with the intensity of someone trying to reconcile impossible information with undeniable recognition. "My father died during the Centauri campaign," she whispered. "I was at his memorial service. I have his Medal of Honor on my desk at home." "Your father did die during that campaign," Marcus replied gently. "But I survived long enough to learn things that Earth needed to know. Things important enough that Marcus Chen had to stay dead so that humanity could live." He moved slowly toward her, pulling out the data chip that contained 25 years of accumulated intelligence. "Sarah, you're walking into a trap. The Valorians never intended to negotiate with Earth as equals. Everything that's happened since your ship arrived has been designed to weaken your position and force you to accept client species status." Sarah's diplomatic training warred with emotional shock as she processed what he was telling her. "That's impossible. The preliminary negotiations have been cordial. Ambassador Thexatar has been accommodating, even helpful. Ambassador Thexatar has been gathering intelligence on your psychological weaknesses and measuring Earth's desperation. Tonight, they're planning to stage a demonstration that will show you the consequences of resistance. Humans working on this station are going to be used as examples of what happens when your species gets too ambitious." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had studied xenopsychology extensively, but the academic understanding of alien manipulation tactics was different from experiencing them firsthand. "You're telling me that hundreds of people are going to be killed just to intimidate Earth's government?" "Not killed. Worse. They'll be subjected to protective custody that will effectively make them hostages. Then you'll be offered a choice. Accept client species status and guarantee their safety, or reject the terms and take responsibility for their suffering." Marcus activated his tablet and showed her surveillance footage from the previous evening, recordings of Valorian guards discussing operational details with casual indifference. Sarah watched her own image appear on security monitors as alien analysts dissected her mannerisms and identified emotional pressure points that could be exploited. "How do I know you're really my father?" she asked, though her voice suggested she was already beginning to believe him. Marcus smiled sadly and pulled out a small object that had been hidden in his gear for over 2 decades. It was a child's drawing, carefully preserved in protective material, showing a little girl and her father in his military uniform. At the bottom, in crayon letters, were the words, "Sarah and Daddy forever and always." Sarah's hands shook as she recognized the picture she had drawn shortly before her father's final deployment. "You kept it." "I kept it through 2 years of interrogation, 3 different identities, and 23 years of serving drinks to aliens who saw humans as barely sentient. It was the only piece of my real life that I could bring with me into exile." The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside reminded them both that time was running out. Marcus quickly activated a small device that would jam surveillance equipment in the immediate area, giving them a few more minutes of privacy. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. The intelligence on this data chip contains everything Earth needs to know about Valorian military capabilities, strategic weaknesses, and expansion plans. But more importantly, it contains proof that humanity is not as helpless as we've been pretending to be." He explained quickly about the hidden defensive installations that Earth had been building in secret, the advanced weapons systems that had been disguised as industrial equipment, and the military alliances with other species that had been conducted through unofficial channels. For 25 years, Earth had been preparing for the day when they would have to stand as equals rather than supplicants. The Valorians believe they're negotiating with a primitive species that has no choice but to accept whatever terms are offered, Marcus continued. If they realized Earth's true capabilities, they would either modify their approach significantly or attempt to eliminate humanity entirely. Your mission here was never about accepting their terms. It was about buying time for Earth to complete its preparations. Sarah absorbed this information with the quick thinking that had made her an effective diplomat. If that's true, then my instructions were incomplete. I was told to secure the best possible terms for trade and technology transfer. Because Earth's government couldn't risk the possibility that your real mission would be discovered. The Valorians are monitoring all communications, analyzing every word and gesture. If you had known the full truth, your behavior would have reflected that knowledge. A soft chime from Marcus's equipment indicated that the maintenance window was closing rapidly. He had perhaps 2 minutes before security protocols resumed and their conversation would be detected. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked, her diplomatic composure returning as she shifted into operational mode. "First, this data chip needs to reach Earth through a communication channel that the Valorians can't monitor. I have a contact in the communications center who can arrange that, but it has to happen today before the demonstration begins." Marcus handed her a small transmitter disguised as a diplomatic seal. "Second, you need to change your negotiation strategy. Don't act desperate or intimidated. Instead, ask questions that demonstrate knowledge you shouldn't have. Make them wonder what else Earth knows. And third, you need to be prepared for the possibility that we're all going to have to fight our way out of here. The Valorians have contingency plans for eliminating Earth's delegation if negotiations don't proceed according to their schedule." Sarah nodded grimly. She had been trained in personal defense as part of her diplomatic preparation, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for the possibility of armed conflict during what was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "There are at least 4 other humans working on this station who have military backgrounds similar to mine. We've never contacted each other because secrecy was essential for all our survival. But if this situation escalates, we might be able to coordinate a response that the Valorians won't expect." The maintenance access window closed with a soft electronic tone, indicating that normal security protocols had resumed. Marcus quickly gathered his equipment and prepared to return to the ceiling access panel. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly as he prepared to leave, "after this is over, after whatever happens next, can we—" "If we all survive the next 24 hours, Marcus replied, "I'd like very much to meet the remarkable woman my daughter became. But right now, the soldier needs to make sure the diplomat lives long enough for that conversation." He disappeared through the ceiling panel with the same silent efficiency he had used to enter, leaving Sarah alone with information that changed everything about her mission on Nexus Station. The afternoon session of preliminary negotiations proceeded differently than the Valorians expected. Instead of displaying the nervous uncertainty they had observed earlier, Ambassador Chen asked pointed questions about Valorian expansion policies and made references to galactic trade regulations that suggested extensive preparation. Her security detail remained alert but relaxed, showing none of the tension that would indicate knowledge of impending danger. From his position behind the bar at the Cosmic Pour, Marcus watched the Valorian leadership's growing confusion through surveillance feeds that Roberts had discreetly provided. Their carefully planned psychological warfare was failing to achieve the desired effect, and they were beginning to suspect that Earth's delegation had access to intelligence sources they hadn't accounted for. At 1800 hours, as the station's artificial evening cycle began, Ambassador Thextar made an unexpected announcement. The demonstration planned for that evening would be postponed, pending further evaluation of Earth's negotiating position. Marcus recognized the decision for what it was. The Valorians were adjusting their strategy because their initial assessment of human capabilities was proving inaccurate. The postponement bought valuable time, but it also indicated that the Valorians were moving toward more direct action. If they couldn't intimidate Earth's delegation into submission, they would consider elimination as an alternative. That evening, as Marcus prepared to close the cosmic pore for what might be the final time, he received a coded message from Roberts confirming that the data chip had been successfully transmitted to Earth through quantum channels that bypassed all Valorian monitoring. Somewhere in the Sol system, human military commanders were receiving intelligence that would reshape their understanding of galactic politics and their own position within it. But the immediate situation remained dangerous. Sarah and her delegation were still trapped on a station controlled by powers that viewed humanity as either a resource to be exploited or a problem to be eliminated. And Marcus Chen, after 25 years of carefully maintained anonymity, had revealed himself as an active threat to Valorian interests. As he sealed the entrance to his bar and activated security systems that would delay but not stop a determined assault, Marcus reflected on the choices that had brought him to this moment. He had sacrificed his identity, his family, and his life on Earth to protect humanity's future. Tomorrow would determine whether that sacrifice had been worthwhile or merely delayed an inevitable tragedy. The bartender was gone forever, disappeared as completely as the soldier had vanished 25 years earlier. What remained was Marcus Chen, a father who would do whatever was necessary to ensure that his daughter and his species survived to write their own destiny among the stars. In the diplomatic quarters, Sarah Chen reviewed files and prepared for negotiations that would determine humanity's place in galactic civilization. She carried with her the knowledge that Earth was stronger than their enemies suspected and the hope that a father's love could transcend even the vast distances between stars. The final act of this drama would begin with the next day's dawn, when words would give way to action and the true measure of human determination would be tested against alien arrogance. But tonight, for the first time in 25 years, a daughter knew that her father was alive and fighting for the future they both believed in.